In this episode, I want to talk to you about what I believe is the most private messaging service, hands down, of anything available today, why you should use it, how you can download it most securely, and why I've basically changed entirely from Signal to this messenger. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel. Hit the subscribe button and slam the bell icon so you're notified when new videos come out. Your support is so appreciated. We're still on the march to climb to over 10,000 subscribers on this channel. Every single subscription counts. It's free. What are you waiting for? And great information like what I'm about to share with you about this private messenger, or what you can expect. That and daily reports on the DeFi markets and on the crypto mining markets. This is the only show on YouTube that gives you a holistic overview of what you can do with GPU mining after you've gotten your coins. I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's kept me around for a while, so thanks for that subscription. Guys, without further ado, I don't mean to hold this over your head. Let me show you exactly the messenger that I'm talking about. You may have guessed it. That's right, Session Messenger, available at getsession.org. And Session Messenger is a fork of the open source of Signal. Now, you might be saying, Seth, wait a second, you just said that you're not using Signal and you're using Session. Isn't Session based on Signal? Well, yes and no. Session is significantly changed from the core function of Signal in that it handles account provision differently and it handles metadata differently. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in this video. We're also going to talk a little bit about why that's important and how it is I know that I can trust the Session Messenger. And again, this is not a sponsored video. The team over at Oxen and Loki, rather, the project formerly known as Loki, which creates the Session Messenger, they don't know I'm making this video. This is just what I do with them, right? It's just that important to me as a privacy advocate that on the Freedom Phone that you find over at mineyour.biz, I recommend that you add this browser immediately, or this messenger immediately, and use it instead of Signal, which is the default on Calyx OS, which ships on our phone. Again, that's a mouthful. Let me explain this in simplest terms. Session is different from Signal in that it doesn't require a phone number for you to sign up or an email for you to sign up. That means that the foundation that offers Session and does the development work, even if they were handed a subpoena by the local government where they're based in Australia, or the national government where they're based in Australia, they couldn't reveal personally identifying information such as phone numbers or email addresses. And they couldn't positively correlate that information, of course, to a real world identity. The way that identities and the way that session IDs are created on the Session Messenger is very, very different. It's much closer to how you set up a brand new cryptocurrency wallet with a seed phrase that then creates a session ID, which is the representation of that seed phrase in a cryptographic hash. Now, I know that for anybody who doesn't understand what those words mean, I'll just put it this way. You don't need a phone number. You don't need an email to sign up. You use some other identifier that is not personally identifying. That's right. It doesn't correlate to your real world face or identity in any other way. And you can create new identities on the fly, multiple identities for every single device, and have them travel with you to other devices. It's a bit like sending encrypted email with PGP, right, or GPG, and being able to set up new GPG keys for the same email address. You're still the same person receiving email, but you have different cryptographic proofs that can be used to help different groups communicate with you. I know it's a little bit different. I don't mean to confuse the issue there, but I just do mean to say that it is a great way to preserve your privacy by not broadcasting metadata. That is to say, the data that surrounds the core data that you're sending. So there can't be any correlations made about the core data that you're sending. It's really pretty awesome. So something that I'm very excited about is that you can download it across different platforms, right? For iOS, for Android. You can even download the APK, the installer file, directly for Android devices. And you can also install it across various platforms for the desktop, right? Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. I love that functionality. I love that flexibility. I use Linux as a daily driver every single day. but I still use Windows for media production like this for now. That may change in the future, but I still use Windows. And in the future, I may want to use macOS in the most private way that I can for certain applications. I've been a cross-OS user for well over a decade, and I love all three for what they're good at. I just prefer Linux for its privacy. So the fact that they've supported Linux from day one is awesome. What you can't see immediately over here on the mobile version of Session is that it's available on F-Droid. I'm a huge advocate of F-Droid. I think you should be too if you use Android and you want to use it more privately. Even if you're using a fully Googleified version of Android, I think you should be using F-Droid. It's a private or open source, free and open source repository management tool. And in layman's terms, that just means it's an app store for open source applications that you want to download directly from the developers without Google's permission. Pretty cool, right? Nothing like that exists on iOS. It's just not possible to do with how locked down those devices are. Now, does that mean that the F-Droid store has zero curation, that they'll just let anything live there? Well, no, that's not exactly what it means. What it means is that users are empowered after they get the base F-Droid store installed to add repositories or the buckets where these developers' code lives. If you like that developer's work, you can add their repository. And again, for the layperson, that's just where their code lives on GitHub or somewhere else. Add it directly, and then when they create updates, F-Droid will manage pushing the updates to your phone. Where if you normally download those kinds of updates from, say, on your desktop, you'd have to manually go there and look for updates, or the application itself would have to be coded to alert you to updates and push those notifications to you. With F-Droid, it's made very simple, and it is a bit of a standard for open source, free and open source software. I love that the Oxen team and the Session development team has finally been able to do this, and I've been asking for it for a while. So, developer team, thank you. Let me jump out of the way and just let you know, it's not obvious here that you can do that, but I'll show you how in this video. And we'll talk a little bit about, again, why Session is so important to me. I've already covered it in a nutshell, but there's some documentation here on their site. This is oxen.io. They've got full documentation about Session. You can look it up and see the full how-to here. We may cover that in a future video, but today I just want to advocate for you getting started, and you can do that by downloading it for your device of choice. It doesn't take long, and it's free. Not only free, open source, not only open source, fully audited. So let's talk about that too. Now on the GitHub, you can see right here, it's available on the F-Droid repo. This is where it becomes apparent that you can use F-Droid. And if you go to fdroid.getsession.org, and you'll see a link down in the description of this video for you to just directly click over to that link. What you'll see is a message like this in plain text. It's pretty simple, but it just tells you that copying this string right here on your Android device, navigating to the F-Droid application into the settings, and then adding the repository there under the settings menu, you'll be able to just paste that in and you're off to the races. Automatic updates are available through F-Droid after that point moving forward. And because the team is committed to this, every new production-worthy update, everything that gets finally into production will be pushed to your phone. It's pretty darn cool. I'm really excited about it. But let's talk about what it means to have an audit. It's pretty important. Quarks Lab, back in April 30th, they announced that Quarks Lab had done an audit on the Session code base. What that means is, I've done some highlighting here in Session green. You're welcome, team. Kept it branded, but I did use a highlighter to go over some of what I thought were the important points. But the audit itself is a very deep dive, and I don't see my channel covering it. Let me make that a little bit bigger so easier for the audience to read. But I don't see my channel covering it. I think it's a little bit too complex for what we typically cover on this channel. So maybe if the audience wants, we can take a look at it. I'm not a developer. I don't feel totally qualified to speak in depth about how that audit was conducted. But if you want, we can take a closer look, and I can try to decipher, so to speak, how the audit went. I think this high-level overview, probably a little better though. So the bottom line is that Session is cryptographically sound. There is no flaw in the cryptography or the libraries they chose to use. I believe it's libsodium, the cryptographic library that they chose to use. There is no issue there. There have been some public criticisms of cryptography. The late John McAfee, rest in peace, he mentioned publicly that he thought that most cryptography was compromised in so-called private messengers and private email applications. He may have been right. And there are some people who believe that, like he did, that there's a fundamental problem not with the cryptography, but with some of the open source libraries that offer cryptography very simply to developers, right? Instead of having to roll their own cryptography as mathematician/cryptographers, in addition to being developers, I think that he believed that some of the cryptographic libraries that are commonly used in the open source may be compromised. Well, this audit reveals that for Session at least, that is not the case. This is an independent audit that shows their cryptography is sound and that there is no back door to the libraries being used, as far as I can tell. Session is designed to reduce the amount of trust you need to place in your messenger. Why trust when you can verify? And that's what audits are. And that's what open source allows for, is not just a third-party audit by a paid company, but by anyone who wants to audit the code. Good, bad, and different, friend or foe, anybody can audit the code. So this is a huge step forward for the amount of, well, blind faith, I won't say trust, but blind faith that a non-technical person can give to Session. This audit goes a long way. And they bring up very transparently what was brought up in the audit, what the problems were as perceived by the audit. They found 7 issues with the Android client, and yikes, that hits me very personally, because even though I have a test device here that is an iOS device, Android is my daily driver. De-Googled Android is my daily driver. But whether or not Google is present on my phone, if there's a flaw with the Android application, the application they have running here, then it's going to affect me. But here's the thing, only one of the issues raised was considered severe by Quark's Lab and only pertained to Session on Android. So that issue, they fixed it immediately. The unfixed issues were actually some of the new functions that the Session developer team wants to add in the future, and they're not added or rolled out yet. So they can fix them as they go before they deploy those features out to the main version, right, the main release of Session. So now that it has that code audit, it was hard to trust before for non-technical people. Now it is so easy to recommend. Rob Braxman, if this video hits your desk, I challenge you to start recommending Session. You mentioned months ago, I think before this audit, that you weren't quite sure yet. Please revisit Session. Please use your platform to promote this particular messenger. I think it's one of the best out there, and I'm asking everybody who I onboarded onto Signal over the last several years to start using Session instead. Let me end on a more positive note. The frequently asked questions, I think this is important for us to cover in this video before I let you go. Just really briefly, under security, there are some questions that I think will help you out a lot. This is available at getsession.org/FAQ. And if you have deep dive questions, or if you have beginner onboarding questions, you're going to find a lot of answers here. And so I want to scroll past this quickly. Some highlighted notes that I think are important is if somebody else has possession of your phone, you can set a PIN for your Session ID and for the application. Now, that may make it more difficult for you to access your own messages, but obviously it'll make it that much more difficult for a third party to access your messages as well. Obviously, if there's some kind of surveillance software on your phone that does screen recording, that is a potential threat vector as well. And there's not much that any private messaging service can do about that. If, for example, you already have obtained root access on your phone and you routinely allow for root access, root privileges for other applications. So there can be some issues with screen recording and third-party surveillance systems, regardless of which messenger you use. Just know that's something that an application like Session can't fix. It's outside of their control. It has everything to do with user behavior, right? We need to fix that based on what we choose. So you can access those messages through a PIN. And that's kind of the extent of it if everything else is secure on your end. Backups are shown here. Everything else is shown here. What I wanted to get to was the privacy and how privacy is protected. I already mentioned it before, but let's mention it a third time. I think this is worth going over, guys. You don't need an email account or a mobile phone number to create an account with Session. That's a requirement on Signal. That's a requirement on several of the other competing private messengers, as they require you to give up your personally identifying information. And worse, in the case of Session, once that happens, your contact list is also stored on Signal servers for them to be able to recommend new contacts to you. This is a huge personal data privacy no-no, and personal data privacy advocates should take this very seriously. What Signal has been asking people to do is not a good practice. It reinforces very bad user behaviors of giving up personally identifying information. So, that out of the way, Session doesn't ask for that. As far as IP tracking, well, no, it's not revealed to the recipient of your messages. And the service nodes that run on the Oxen network run something called LokiNet. It's very similar to onion routing, but it's unique. You may see on my channel a direct interview of the developer who created this platform. That was so important to me, to be able to talk to the minds and the hands that built this infrastructure. And I think it's one of the best out there. And I've personally been watching it over the last 3 years as they've gone from a relatively obscure cryptocurrency project to then a relatively obscure masternode project to now having this offering that is fully supported from the foundation up to a final audit in April. And as they say themselves, is very easy to recommend to others. I can do it very happily and with a clear conscience. I have concerns about Signal now that are just coming out. Session helps resolve those. But IP address is not being revealed to the intended recipient of the message. And metadata, as mentioned before, things like IP address and contacts IP address, that's all metadata that can be revealed. The date and time of your messages, all of that can be revealed and stored using some of the other popular private messengers out there. And again, this is part of my series of debunking media against Eric Finman's Freedom Phone. Again, without making it personal, I think it's a mistake to include some of the applications that are on that phone. It does not protect your freedom of speech. It does not protect your privacy. There is no freedom of speech without privacy first. So you have to protect privacy at the base level, and Session does that. So yeah, any other applications that come pre-installed on some phones, they're just not going to do it well enough. Push notifications on mobile platforms, well, there's either Firebase or background polling. I recommend background polling. Personally, it does increase battery utilization just a little bit, but it prevents you from having to use any of Google's services, such as Firebase. Firebase is it's a terrible choice that developers have to make. However, it makes their lives easier to be able to give automated notifications to their Android users. So sorry about that. Kind of a bummer if people choose to do that. I think that the best possible choice for you is just take that hit to battery life. If you're using a fully de-Googled Android phone anyway, your battery life is already vastly improved. So you won't notice that battery hit too much by having background polling on Session if you're on a de-Googled phone like the one I sell at miner.biz. So there you go. Just periodic polling for those messages. You'll get a notification if there is one to be retrieved. And then on iOS, apparently, there's background polling or Apple push notifications. If you're on iOS, I strongly recommend background polling. Do not let Apple see what notifications are being pushed to your phone. Why not? Why not use Firebase? Why not use Apple push notifications? Well, this is a form of metadata that they can still aggregate for this ecosystem. So they can create a fingerprint, or they can create a bit of a data signature for how the application is used. We don't want this. I'm just saying this. In general, we don't want this. We don't want Google or Apple to know how much or how little Session is being used. So if you're on either one, iOS or Android, go to background polling instead. And then you help everybody by the network effect of it being more private. Every person who chooses to be more private and query the network directly instead of using Apple or Google helps improve the privacy of every other user. So the more of us that do it, the more secure we are in terms of not having metadata of even just usage being aggregated by Google or Apple. So we take everything out of their hands. And then this was news to me when I saw it, so I just wanted to mention it again. Can you list session on F-Droid? And I've been asking them openly on Twitter. Thank you. You haven't been acknowledging me directly on Twitter, but that's cool. That's cool. I know we got some history, but this is all right. You can ignore me now. I kid. Guys, thanks. Thanks for doing this. This is awesome. Time to publicly reward good behavior. You did it, right? You did it. You started listing it on F-Droid, and now users on Android can get their updates pushed automatically as well. Guys, that's session in a very, very large nutshell. Why did I want to bring this up this morning? Because of Metcalfe's law. We need more users, right? There are plenty of users on session. We can do better. You and I, we can do better. The value of this network, this private communication network, will grow with more users. We need you. I need you. I mean, don't make it weird. I meant platonically. But I need you to be more private so that you help me become more private. I need you to bring your family into a more private communication style so that we can all be more private. And also, with recent news about various types of surveillance by various three-letter agencies and various government organizations, I think the time is absolutely right for us to push very heavily for more private communication. Guys, thanks so much for watching to the end of the video. Please do go to F-Droid, fdroid.getsession.org if you are on any Android device. And please do remember to accept background polling and not the Firebase or the Apple push notifications on your installation of Session. Appreciate that thumbs up, appreciate that share, appreciate that subscription, and that clicking of the bell icon so you know when new videos come out. You're the reason I make this media. Remember to stay private and mind your biz. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. If you want to be notified of videos like this in the future, first off, click subscribe, press the bell icon. Additionally, you can sign up for the Mind Your Biz email newsletter. That'll give you exclusive access to certain freebies, notifications for deals within the cryptocurrency mining space, as well as some of our flash sales for merchandise, which you can buy with cryptocurrency. That's right. It's the only cryptocurrency merch that you can buy with cryptocurrency. We practice what we preach. As always, thank you so much for watching. You're the reason I make this media. I love your face, and I will see you in the next one.